Welcome, everybody, to this month's Climate Action Network webinar, a project of Climate Action Santa Monica, or CASM as we call it. I'm Kent Strumpel, co-chair of our steering committee. We have a great program lined up for you today with our guest Michael Schneider, founder of Streets for All, a mobility advocacy group that has made huge strides in the past few years. But first, though, Laureen Von Clan, the other co-chair of our steering committee, is going to give us a few updates on activities at CASM. Laureen?
Thank you, Kent. I think a lot of you know CASM already, but for those who don't, know that what we're up to these days, we've got a lot of exciting work underway. We are working with Samo High students, parents, and the administration in particular on how kids get to school. We really would like to start them in 8th grade and have them think about high school as a way that they get to school independently on safe bicycle infrastructure, great bus options, wonderful walking, shared rides, etc. We've been gathering data at registration and hope to develop an advocacy program that you can all get behind. We're working on 100% clean renewable energy for our whole community. We've had great success with this. 96% of accounts in Santa Monica are signed on for 100% clean renewable energy, but our largest energy users, schools, the college, some others, are not there yet, and we really need them to come on board. We are also looking at a lot of engagement opportunities. We have a jobs program, workforce development for young people, a summer training program for high school kids, and I hope a lot of fun events coming up that you can all participate in. We have a King Tides event coming up in January to witness the high tides and document how our community experiences those. And we always have opportunities for people to show up, speak up, and advocate. So please, if you're not on in touch and engaged with us, we'd like for you to do that. So thank you, Kent. And now Nancy Sanchez, one of our climate fellows, will update a little bit on a local project you should know about if you don't already.
Thank you so much, Lorraine. Hello, everyone. My name is Nancy Sanchez. If you follow us on Instagram, you might have seen some of our other fellow CASM members conducting outreach for the Westside Mobility Projects. As a part of the Westside Mobility Projects, the Los Angeles Department of Transportation, LA DOT, is planning a network of 4 bikeways connecting Westside neighborhoods and adjacent cities. The Westside Mobility Projects is asking for input from cyclists on how to improve these 4 corridors, which is a great opportunity for anyone to help the city identify what needs to be done to make cycling safer. Their project is a great opportunity for input, and with their virtual online activity page, it allows you to point out specific places or routes that you think need attention. If you're interested, we will be providing a link in the chat. And now on, I will be handing this back to Kent.
Thank you, Nancy. Yeah, I think that's a great opportunity for cyclists to share their local knowledge. So grab that link in the chat and share your input. All right. Once again, our guest today is Michael Schneider, founder of Streets for All. I think it's important to start by noting that transportation makes a huge contribution to global carbon emissions and therefore to the climate crisis that's upon us. In California, the transportation sector accounts for about 50% of total carbon emissions. In Santa Monica, it's over 60%, the majority coming from private cars. So mobility advocacy is climate advocacy, and expanding alternatives to the private car offers one of the most valuable climate solutions that we have some local control over. In the few short years that Streets for All has been on the scene, they have become one of the most effective mobility advocacy groups in LA County, if not the state. Their campaigns range from well-developed project proposals to sponsoring state legislation, producing voter guides, and even putting an initiative on the ballot for City of LA voters. This work reflects a professionalism and political savvy that has raised the bar for advocacy in LA. So we're honored to have Michael with us today to talk about the work and methods of Streets for All. He's going to start by giving us a short presentation, which will be followed by my interview with him, and then question and answers, answering questions submitted by all of you. Note that you can begin putting questions in the chat at any time. So welcome, Michael Schneider. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kent. It's great to be with everybody. And Kent, you're also a star in this community, and you're very much missed on the Bicycle Advisory Committee. So I just wanted to throw that in. So I think I'll just jump into the slides. They're very graphical and they should go pretty fast, and looking forward to the interview. But I'm excited to share a little bit of Streets for All, my story and Streets for All story today. Does this look okay at full screen? Yes, okay. So I am starting with this pretty, frankly, douchey picture of myself about 15 years ago to emphasize how car-brained I was. I am standing in Europe next to a BMW that I had just picked up. I was spending a completely disproportionate amount of my income leasing cars. And I did this program called European Delivery, where they then send it over and you get to drive it over here. And I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. And so it was almost built into my DNA to drive everywhere and to think that that was just the way you had to get around Los Angeles. There just was no other way. To put a fine point on this, I lived in Brentwood at the time. And this was the typical route I would drive to go to the supermarket, to a Whole Foods on San Vicente. Yes, that's about a little over half of a mile. So it's about a 10-minute walk. And when I got there, I would complain that there wasn't enough parking in the parking lot. And LA's biggest issue was we just needed more space for cars, so I didn't have to wait to park my car. So I think this to me really illustrates how brainwashed I was. And this is about 12 years ago. Starting about 11 years ago, I had to give up that beautiful, expensive BMW, and I had to borrow a car from a family member. It was my grandfather's classic Mercedes. I was a startup and tech CEO, and the Great Recession of 2008, 2009 hit my companies pretty hard. And I could no longer support spending an enormous amount of money per month on a lease. So I borrowed this beautiful car that looked great, but it was in the shop more than it worked. This was a very typical way I'd start my days. And I really got sick of it. And so starting about 10 years ago, my then girlfriend, now wife, got me this old Schwinn off of Craigslist. It was probably about $100. And I dusted it off and I decided to try and get around town without dying for 1 week. That's what I had in my head. Just try not die for a week. I started going to and from my gym, to and from my office. Those were both fairly close. And it took me about 48 hours to rediscover something I loved as a kid. I loved riding my bike as a kid, but I hadn't done it in many years, except maybe on a beach on a vacation somewhere. And it never occurred to me as a native Angeleno that I could even use a bicycle in LA for transportation. That seemed completely crazy and foreign. But in 48 hours, I was hooked. I couldn't believe that I had solved two of the biggest problems LA Angelenos complain about. I was never in traffic. I never had to look for parking. And I was having fun and feeling great just getting to where I needed to go. So as I started to bike more and more places, I remember very clearly the first time I rode from near the West Hollywood area to Santa Monica to have lunch with a buddy. He paraded me around his office saying, "Michael just biked here from West Hollywood. How crazy is that?" And people were like offering to donate money so I could buy a car. And at that point, I didn't want a car. I wanted to live this way, but I started to resent how unnecessarily unsafe I felt riding a bike with a city with some of the best weather in the world. So I started to educate myself. I learned about how in the late 1800s, early 1900s, we had bike highways that were elevated. This is near Pasadena. And I really started to learn about the tragedy of our public transit system and how we had red and yellow cars that went everywhere. And in the 1920s, LA had the biggest public transit system in the world, and how by the 1980s, we had essentially nothing. And we're rebuilding that today at a very high price per mile. I also learned about freeways and how destructive freeways had been to communities in Los Angeles. It never really occurred to me growing up here, but I started to read books and articles about this and how they were intentionally placed in brown and black communities and how they disconnected communities. Still today, if you're walking or if you're on a bike, usually some of the most dangerous part of your journey is going to be getting between two sides of a freeway. So I was minding my own business, riding my bike, and then my wife and I started to have kids. And what was frustrating to me as just a guy trying to get around doing his day-to-day work on my bicycle with drivers, where they would cut me off or honk at me or do things that made me feel unsafe, kind of turned into blind rage when I had one of my daughters on the bike with me. And so it occurred to me, I couldn't tell you who my city council member was, how many there were, who made decisions. I had no idea. And so I spent the first part of 2019 talking to anybody that would talk to me in the county, in the city, just trying to understand. I wanted answers to basic questions. Why is the built environment the way it is? Who's making these decisions? And how do we change the decisions that are being made? And one of the first things I did was I ran for and was elected to my neighborhood council. Since 2019, I sit on Mid-City West Neighborhood Council, and I chair the Transportation Committee. This is one of LA's 99 neighborhood councils. That's the first flyer I used to run in 2019. I got myself appointed to the Bicycle Advisory Committee, where I was fortunate enough to work alongside other advocates like Kent. I was appointed to Metro Sustainability Council. But the most important thing I think I've done over the last 4 years is start Streets for All. I came to the conclusion that there were a lot of good 501c3s and nonprofit organizations doing good work in Los Angeles, but no one could tell you who to vote for. And the conclusion I came to was, if you want to change the city, you have to change the city council. Begging, moaning, complaining at meetings wasn't getting it done. So I started Streets for All as LA's first and still only political action committee that is focused on transportation. We have a 501c4 arm now, we have a PAC, and then we have a relationship with a C3 that allows us to take in tax deductible dollars and spend that on advocacy work. But the political work we do, I think, is some of the most important. We host mobility debates. Transportation, bike lanes, bus lanes weren't even considerations in debates for city council before we started asking those questions. Candidates started buying for our endorsement. And we have had a hand in flipping 4 city council seats in the last 4 years. Obviously, many others did too, but we've helped those efforts. And we're on our way to getting an LA City Council that is going to be incredibly supportive of this stuff instead of fighting it all the time. So this is one of the first flyers we did on the left. We were trying to get Nithya into office. David Rue's cancellation of a protected bike lane on 6th Street near LACMA after someone was killed on the street enraged me so much. It was another thing that caused me to be politically active. And we really wanted him out of office. He never met a bike lane he'd want to kill. And Nithya, now in office, you can see the difference. CD4 is proactively asking for active transportation infrastructure, bus lanes, pedestrian space, et cetera. You can see in our YouTube channel, it's just youtube.com/streetsforall, all of the mobility debates if you're curious about those. And we made a big deal when our candidates won. So what we have done here is tried to convince candidates and politicians that fighting for things like bike lanes and bus lanes and pedestrianized space is actually good politics. It will help them win elections. And I think that's been a really important paradigm shift. We've also supported specific advocacy campaigns. On the left is a website we did in cooperation with advocates in Eagle Rock that were fighting a battle last year to maintain a protected bike lane, a BRT, and trees. And that was successful ultimately, but it took a lot of work. On the right-hand side is a Twitter bot we created. I'm still going to call it Twitter. I refuse to call it X. That automatically tweets every time somebody is hurt by a car, hurt or killed. So cyclists, pedestrians, et cetera. And we also tag the relevant neighborhood council or political leaders in that area so they see the consequences of their action or inaction for safe streets. Venice Boulevard for All on the left was one of our very first projects. Venice Boulevard is the only street in the LA area that goes from the ocean to downtown Los Angeles that is basically entirely in the city of Los Angeles. Every other major street goes through multiple jurisdictions. So it's a really important street to get right. It's a great opportunity to build a complete street. It used to have a red car in the middle of it, so it's incredibly wide. And on the city's mobility plan, it has protected bike lanes and 24/7 bus lanes. And so we started this in 2019. COVID kind of derailed it for a minute, but it was really exciting a few months ago when LADOT and Metro finally opened 4 miles of protected bike lanes. So they converted those door zone bike lanes on Venice to curbside protected, parking protected, and the first 24/7 dedicated bus lanes outside of downtown LA. So that's really exciting. We now want to get it further west to the ocean and further east to downtown. We, during the pandemic, put other plans on hold and advocated for slow streets, or what became slow streets in the city. And that was really at light speed. We started advocating, and about 6 weeks later, Mayor Garcetti stood up and approved the program and launched it. We also tracked the city like a hawk when it came to repaving, because anytime the city repaves a street, it's a golden opportunity to put in a planned bike or bus lane, but the city's status quo was not getting that done. So under this ADAPT program during COVID, where the city accelerated repavings on commercial corridors, we really watched them like a hawk and worked with council offices and got about 10 miles of new protected bike lanes in a very short amount of time. On the left-hand side, we raised $420,000 earlier this year from the city of LA, from Culver City, from Holly Mitchell's office and the Baldwin Hills Conservancy to extend the Ballona Creek bike path further east to Venice and Cochrane, which is actually where the creek ends. There's actually a number of community events and meetings coming up starting this Sunday, the following week, and in early October. And you can learn more at finishthecreek.com. If you use the Ballona Creek bike path, live anywhere near it, or care about it being extended, please take the survey on finishthecreek.com and come to these community meetings. It's a really important part of the feasibility study. And the goal is to pass our finished feasibility study over to LA's Bureau of Engineering and apply for ATP Cycle 7 to actually construct the thing, maybe by the Olympics. We'll see. One of the most ambitious and crazy plans we have come up with is about the 90 freeway. The 90 freeway, and let's see if this video plays well. It's a 3.1 mile stub of what was supposed to be a 50-mile freeway. It's currently 130 acres, with about 60 of those just concrete and the freeway. And we want to turn it into this, one of the largest parks in Los Angeles, 4,000 units of affordable housing, bus rapid transit, walking paths, bike trails, and retail underneath the housing, so you don't need to get in the car just to pick up a gallon of milk at the store. We're calling it Marina Central Park. We are about to submit a Reconnecting Communities grant application to the federal government for $2 million to do a feasibility study with our partners at SWA. And it would be the first time in the LA area that we actually take down a freeway and replace it with something better. This is just a study. I know change scares people, maybe not on this Zoom, but in general. And so we're emphasizing that the study is worth looking at because it's the least trafficked freeway in LA County, and it's the shortest freeway in LA County. Caltrans actually told me that they have an easy time approving requests from film companies to shoot on the 90 freeway during the day. So they shut down the freeway for a film shoot, and there's really not a lot of side consequences to that. So this is a very exciting thing that we're currently working on. We're also very active in Sacramento. This started by accident in 2021, where we were asked to do a Me Too. I didn't even know what a Me Too was, but that's the way you make public comment in Sacramento, where you essentially say, I too support this or I oppose this. In 2022, our all volunteer org at the time got 4 bills signed by the governor. This year, we have 11 bills that we've either written or sponsored, 10 of which are through the Assembly and the Senate and are waiting at the governor's desk. So that is so exciting. 2 things I want to highlight that I'm most excited about: AB 645, that would legalize speed cameras in California, and there'd be certain pilot cities. The city of Los Angeles would be one of those. SB 411 is also really important to our work. It may not be obvious, the connection between allowing neighborhood councils to meet on Zooms and our work, but there's 2 connections. One, it reduces vehicle miles traveled, so people aren't driving all over the place just to attend a neighborhood meeting. And 2, we often try to get the support of neighborhood councils in regions, and it's really hard to do that if you're having to drive all over town. So that's some of our state work. some of the challenges in the city, we have 3 different departments that touch the street. LADOT controls the striping and how street space is used. So that's really just paint. Streets LA repaves the street. They can also do concrete work and sidewalk work, but they don't control how the street space is used. And then the Bureau of Engineering also does active transportation projects. They mostly do bridges and larger projects, but like I said, they might help us build the Bionic Creek bike path. So we have 3 different organizations. It's very different than, let's say, in New York City, where NYDOT can do concrete curbs. They can do sidewalks. They have a holistic transportation department that can do everything in a street. So this siloing is really challenging. Also, we've had city council members that have just blocked projects because they don't like them. Doesn't matter if it's in the mobility plan, doesn't matter if someone died. I really remember Gil Cedillo in CD1 near downtown LA talking about how after someone was killed on the street and they were proposing changes, that really people just shouldn't cross there. It was just too dangerous. And he saw a mom crossing, rushing with her kids, and the mom should have consequences for putting her kids in jeopardy, as opposed to having a responsibility for maybe making streets safe in his district. Also, LADOT is incredibly understaffed. They're underfunded and understaffed. We have 2 active transportation people for the entire city. New York City is twice our population and has 25, just to give you a sense. So it is so hard, even with these new council members that are asking for bike lanes and bus lanes and change. It's hard for them to get LADOT's attention, and they are the council office. So that really does need to change, and it's a huge hindrance to changing the city a lot faster. What gives me hope is a new crop of leaders. Eunices Hernandez replaced Gil Cedillo in the top left. She's really good on these issues. Nithya Raman replaced David Rue, night and day on these issues. Katie Yaroslavsky replaced Paul Koretz, who, again, never met a bike lane he didn't want to kill. The mayor is not necessarily out front leading on this issue right now, but she is hiring really great people. And so I'm hopeful that the mayor's office will lean in more. Mayor Garcetti said a lot of the right things, but he didn't really back them up with action a lot. And so we're hoping that changes under this administration. Imelda Padilla has indicated more of an interest in transportation compared to Nuri Martinez. Heather Hutt in CD10 helped fund the feasibility study for Bionic Creek. She rides her bike in the city and is sympathetic to these issues. Hugo Soto Martinez replaced Mitch O'Farrell. That was such a huge sea change. Again, Mitch talked a good game and then blocked every bike and bus lane possible in his district. And the new GM of LADOT, Laura Rubio Conejo, is got some good stuff done in Pasadena, and I'm hopeful that she can enact change. A couple other things that I've been active in. I've been pretty active in the LA Times. The LA Times is currently very much on the side of progress when it comes to climate change, when it comes to transportation. And they have graciously published 7 op-eds over the last year that I've written. Everything from how the school drop-off and pickup lines are just kind of absurd, to how we're continuing to invest in widening highways in LA County and how that just makes traffic worse. On the right-hand side, we do calls to action all the time. And one of the things I realized is a lot of people in LA did care about these issues, but they didn't know when community meetings were happening or how to take action. So we try to make it super simple, one-click calls to action, take the survey, click to have a pre-formatted email to send a public comment, stuff like that. On the neighborhood council, I've found it to be really effective to do renderings. We have great volunteers at Streets for All that I've been able to leverage to actually help the public visualize change. So this is from our project to try to get bike lanes in San Vicente. We also are on the neighborhood council, do a lot of community impact statements and share those community impact statements with other neighborhood councils. We have what we call a progress list with about 130 people on neighborhood councils throughout the city. And we share those ideas to have a bigger impact. The biggest thing for us in the next 6 months is our ballot measure. We collected 100,000 signatures last year. It cost $1 million to do, and we qualified Healthy Streets LA, and it is on the March 2024 ballot. All Healthy Streets LA does is it creates an ordinance in the city of Los Angeles that says that city of LA cannot repave a street without implementing a bike or bus lane that's already planned on its own mobility plan. So we're not even trying to change or improve the city's plan. We just want them to implement the plan. They've done 3% in 7 years. It's called the Mobility Plan 2035. It's supposed to be done in 20 years. At the rate they're going, it will take 200 years. So this would dramatically speed things up. It would also save money because when you repave a street, you can restripe it for free. We've raised $2 million for the campaign. You're going to see billboards, you're going to see digital ads, text banking, door knocking, etc. If anyone's interested, you can go to healthystreetsla.com for more info. If you want to volunteer, we'd welcome you with open arms. So to kind of sum it up, Healthy Streets LA is huge for us in the next 6 months. That's our main focus. We want to see LADOT really address their vacancy rate of 18% and hire a lot more bodies to make this work easier. We want to get more protected bike lanes, dedicated bus lanes in the ground, and we are hoping to have an even bigger year in Sacramento next year. So that's it. Thanks for watching and happy to answer questions.
Wow. Thank you, Michael. That's a great presentation and really a fantastic summary of all the work you've been doing. It answers a number of the questions I had prepared to ask you. So I'll move on to some other things I'd like to talk to you about. And remember, folks, you can begin putting questions in the chat at any time. So I think you've mentioned how you became a political action committee, but I'm wondering about a little more detail in that regard, how it actually works to influence policymakers. Does making political donations really open doors in a way that nonprofit campaigns can't? Is that a key part of that?
That's part of it. I think that's just kind of the way the world works. So it's not to say that if you don't donate that an office won't listen to you or maybe do what you're asking, but relationships matter. When people, before they get into office, if you really support them, if you rally for them, if you spend money trying to get them elected, if you have volunteers door knocking for them, they remember that. And that strengthens the relationship should they get into office. They also, I would say, by filling out a Streets for All questionnaire, they're answering very specific questions. Would you support this specific bike lane, this specific bus lane? Would you stand up to community opposition that may not want this, but it would improve safety in this way? They have to go on record. So it allows us and the general public to see where they stand and hold them to account. So I think a combination of having that warm, fuzzy relationship and getting them to put down on paper what they're actually going to do if they're elected into office helps affect change.
Great. Yeah. Well, those sounds like some things that folks can do without having to even make big donations, to assist with the politicians' campaign and give them information that's useful to them.
Absolutely. And I want to be really clear. It's not like we spend $40,000 sending mailers for Ugo, and then he calls and says, okay, I'm going to do everything you ever asked because I'm so grateful. It's more nuanced than that. But he knows we supported him and we know he supports this stuff, which is why he supported him.
Great. Well, I'd like to talk about some of the proposals that you showed us in your presentation there, which are really sophisticated in their use of graphics. And how would you describe their influence at the municipal planning level in terms of how do they get adopted or plugged into the planning that's going on in the city when you create these? Do you think they play an important role in kind of upping the game of what's being talked about within the city?
I wouldn't say so. You talked about pretty graphics. I do want to say that I think one of the biggest things, and I think LADOT is not very good at marketing a lot of the times. Like they don't necessarily have beautiful renderings to wow people into supporting something. That's something that I think is so important. One of my first companies was a design agency. So at a very early age, I developed a respect for good design and how important that was. People are scared of change. I saw it on Uplift Melrose, if anyone followed that a couple of years ago, when Paul Koretz killed what would have been LA's first curb level protected bike lane along Melrose. But the project removed a car lane in each direction. It removed some parking. It had a curb level protected bike lane. And not everybody liked any of those things. However, the renderings had these beautiful trees along Melrose, beautiful outdoor seating, and new lighting. And people were just had stars in their eyes with the trees. And it's funny, trees don't have to be part of a bike project. But when you reconsider a street holistically, I think it helps sell the community. As far as getting into plans, so there are different stages. Venice is already in the plans. That's part of the mobility plan. So literally that was a campaign agitating for implementation of something they've already passed. Frankly, Healthy Streets LA is that same thing. Marina Central Park is on nobody's plan. When I asked Caltrans headquarters, what is the protocol for tearing down a freeway? They said there isn't one. And I said, okay, well, create one. What should we do? And so it goes from the most unplanned, we want this crazy thing to happen, to something very practical, like just follow your own plan with Venice.
Okay. So what goes into developing those presentations? I mean, they seem like they do play a very important role. Both are getting the community on board and also for instigating change within the government. How do they get created? I mean, advocacy groups are often limited by a lack of capacity to take on projects, but every time I go to Streets for All's website, it seems like you have new initiatives underway. I'm curious about Streets for All staff and the volunteers that are producing all this professional media and stuff. What's the history of how your team came together and what fields they come from?
Our staff is very tiny, and up till October 2022, they didn't exist. We were all volunteers. So for the first 3 years of Streets for All's existence, including me, we were all just volunteering our time. By the end of 2022, we had attracted about 300 volunteers from all walks of life. We have people that program our website at night and work at Facebook during the day. We have people that work on Hollywood movies during the day and work on our videos at night. And it turns out that a lot of people care about these issues and they're willing to dedicate their time for the cause because they're passionate. They ride a bike, they don't want to die. They take the bus, they frustrate how slow it is. They're a pedestrian. And if you're a pedestrian at any point, and we all are at some point, you know how unsafe just crossing the street can be. So we're very fortunate to have built something that has kind of been a vacuum cleaner. It sucked up all of this amazing talent and brought it into the orbit and onto our Slack. So when we say, hey, this happened yesterday, we are working with some people in Westchester to try to add bike lanes to La Tijera, and we need some additional renderings. Within about 2 minutes, someone raised their hand and said, oh, I live in Westchester. I'd love to do that. I have the talent to do renderings. And so that's how we do a lot of the work. The staff at Streets for All today is only 4 people, myself included, but we're backed by close to 500 volunteers. And it's really those volunteers that allow us to punch far above our weight at the state level and local level and do a lot of the renderings that you see.
And what's the venue by which the volunteers know about what you're doing and respond to your calls for help and stuff like that? Slack or one of those?
Slack. I mean, they have to get into our Slack. At this point, I think in the beginning, we weren't known at all. So we had to make noise on Twitter and Facebook and go to community meetings. I always carry, I don't have one in front of me, so I can't hold it up, but I always carry our Streets for All stickers. When I'm out riding my bike, I'll give stickers out to other people riding their bike. So we did a lot of stuff like that. At this point, we have close to 10,000 followers on Twitter. We have a lot on Instagram and Facebook. And so I think it's just sort of on a natural organic growth at this point. But yeah, they fill out a volunteer form on our website. They get a phone call and a Zoom session with somebody on the team. And then they're put into Slack. And whenever they feel like raising their hand, they do.
Okay. Yeah, well, that sounds very effective. Could you talk about the role of coalition building and the ways that groups can work together to achieve wins locally and at the state level?
Yeah, almost every one of our campaigns we couldn't have done alone. Our Destruction for Nada campaign We have several other organizations on there. We did the website, but we needed their ideas, their community, their muscle to help lobby Metro. Our Healthy Streets LA campaign has a coalition of 40 organizations. So coalition building is so important. And I would say that not much in LA gets done without a coalition of people asking for something.
So would you say that's true of all the proposals you've made, or?
No, Venice Boulevard was really just us. I mean, we started working with the Palms Neighborhood Council, and ultimately the city took it over and got those 4 miles done. But that really was our initiative. Slow Streets, we did by ourselves, pretty much. Marina Central Park is actually something we've mostly done on our own just because it's happened so fast. I mean, I think we published the website less than 2 months ago, and next week we're applying for this grant with support from Holly Mitchell and Culver City and Mayor Bass and our state senator and assembly member. So that one has gone very fast, and it's really just been us. But if we win this money, there will be 22 months of study and a lot of opportunity to build that coalition. Again, that's not something, that's a generational project, and it's not something we could do on our own.
Okay, very good. I'd like to turn to Santa Monica now. Santa Monica has probably the best bikeway and transit network in LA County. Nonetheless, most people here still feel too vulnerable to use bikes or other small mobility devices for their local trips. What do you think it'll take for our city to transform its roads and bikeways to become a truly bike-friendly city where far greater numbers of the general population would willingly choose to get around without using a car for most of their local trips? Do you think we have some unique opportunities here to really shift the paradigm in Santa Monica?
And I was born in Santa Monica at St. John's. And if I wanted to have a lot less stress in my life and just feel like my city's on the right path, I would just move there. I've been so impressed by the progress that Santa Monica has made. I'm sure for the advocates on the ground, it's not enough. But, you know, it's the Garden of Eden compared to LA. When you ride on a street and you literally get to Centinela, and on one side is this kind of unprotected bike lane with not great pavement, and on the other side waiting for you are green-backed bike lanes with a buffer and bike lights. You really see the difference. And what Santa Monica did on Ocean Avenue, on 17th Street with the first protected intersections, I don't even think the city of Los Angeles has ever built a protected intersection. And Santa Monica, with a much smaller footprint, has one. So I know that's not really answering your question, and I will answer it, but I just want to say I'm so impressed by how much Santa Monica has done. And I feel like when I started doing this work, people would yell, don't try to make LA into Amsterdam. You know, we're just different here. And then New York City under Mayor Bloomberg started making major change, and that people were like, oh, well, that's New York. That's just a different thing. And then San Francisco went car free on Market Street, which is maybe our Wilshire Boulevard. And someone's like, well, that's, you know, San Francisco, whatever. And now it's Santa Monica. And no one in LA, I think, is going to seriously say, well, Santa Monica is just like some unique thing that can't apply in the city of Los Angeles. So I've been very impressed. Having said that, I think you have an amazing staff at the city level that their heart's in the right place. I think this upcoming election is really important. You don't really have a majority of people that want this stuff on council, but so far the people that don't want this stuff have not succeeded in blocking it or really slowing it down. But I think elections matter, and we need to support the people that are sticking their neck out, like Jesse Zwick and Carolyn Terosas and Glenn Davis and others. And I think Santa Monica, given its smaller footprint, it's already I think it was just voted the 7th best biking city in the country, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think there's the seed has already been planted, and the staff is just almost on autopilot with this stuff. I don't even know if this is public, and maybe I shouldn't say anything, but I know that the city is looking at applying for a planning grant for reconnected communities to capping the 10 freeway, where it's sunken, and actually reconnecting the Pico neighborhood. So again, from my point of view, given what I'm seeing in Los Angeles, and unfortunately right now in Culver City and Beverly Hills, you know, Santa Monica is in a really good spot, and I think on a great trajectory.
Great, thanks for that. I agree. So that ends my interview, and I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience now. We'll go as long as we can. We typically end after 1 hour, but if Michael has more time and there's more questions to go, we'll try and cover as many as we can. Laureen, can you let us know the first questions? We're taking them in order.
I've been monitoring the chat. We had a question from Aaron. Maybe you could just dig in a little bit more to this on his question about giving, what advice would you give to other people that want to start similar initiatives in other jurisdictions?
So I am a tech entrepreneur. It's what I've done for 20 years. And so I approached Streets for All and this political work from a very entrepreneurial mindset. I think it's important to not get discouraged when city bureaucrats don't want to be bothered with questions, pesky questions, or really change the trajectory. I think it's important to not get discouraged if you have political setbacks, but just start anywhere. Start, I don't know if it's a smaller city, I think you actually can make change, impactful change, even easier. Just start by figuring out a way to find other like-minded people. That's where I would start. There's a lot of great groups on Facebook, maybe even on Nextdoor, I don't know. But there's other channels to find people that care about what you care about, and just start. I mean, some of the first things I did was just host meetings on the roof of my office. And it started with 20 people, and then 30 people, and then 50 people. And that was sort of in 2019, the seed of Streets for All. I also realized that despite the County Bike Coalition existing, for some reason, there was a huge demand for something like Streets for All at the time. And that's not to take away from any of the good work LACBC has done over the years. But at that moment in time, they couldn't tell you to vote for. That's a given because they're 501c3. But they weren't doing as much pushing on specific bike lanes and bus lanes. And that's what gets people excited. Wow, the street by my house could actually change. We could have a plaza there where I could have lunch and not in front of a highway, or we could have a bike lane there and I could actually get to my kid's school without having to drive. Like, these are the type of things that change lives and people get really excited about. So I hope I answered the question, but I would just start. It doesn't really matter where you start in the early days. Start by finding people that are also excited by it, and then keep going from there. And if you want to email me, I'm happy to have more of a conversation offline.
Wonderful, thank you. What about motivating volunteers and keeping them involved? I know you had your rooftop lunches or meetings, and you keep reaching out, you give them stickers. Say a little bit more about keeping volunteers motivated.
I don't think we've done that good of a job, honestly. Okay. Before we had full-time staff, which was only about a year ago, we had, I mean, today we probably have 6 or 7 volunteers a week coming in. Just onboarding people takes a lot of time. Someone needs to talk to each one if you want to do it right. It really broke my heart. I'm like, man, I remember thinking we have 100 people that have said, I have talent in this area or in that area. And yet we haven't asked them to do anything for 6 months. And when someone volunteers for something, there's not much going on. They kind of get demotivated and go somewhere else. We're getting better at it. We added a question, for example, asking what languages people speak. So, because we often have need for certain translation, and that's one small way to get involved. But usually there was so much going on. There is so much going on that we have not come up with a perfect system to match the perfect volunteer with the perfect project. And so it's kind of informal. We will ask our volunteer channel in Slack, which is close to 400 people, who is interested in XYZ. And then people will usually raise their hands. But I don't think it's perfect, and we need to figure out a much better way to do it. We've also started having more meetups, realizing that people don't just want to dedicate their time, they want to meet other like-minded people. And so that's been helpful in motivating our volunteers in our community as well.
Thank you for that. I posted a question. I'd like to ask it as someone in her mid-60s who wants to use her bike as much as possible. I find I'm becoming even more sensitive to the need for safety. I fear an accident even more than I did when I was younger. And I think there's a lot of potential for older Santa Monicans. We have an older community, and I'm wondering if you've had any thoughts on that, bringing in the silver riders.
So, silver-haired people in general, to stereotype, often are against these type of projects because they can't imagine themselves on a bicycle. What do you mean I'm not going to be able to drive to my doctor's office and park right in front? You're against senior citizens. You're against mobility, people with disabilities, whatever it may be. And that's a shame. Most people, though, haven't gone to the Netherlands and seen 80 and 90-year-olds riding around on bicycles without a helmet, without an issue. That's not common here. I think there's alignment between the silver hair and people under 10 years old in terms of needing safe facilities. My now 5-year-old, when she was 4, I started biking with her to her preschool, and she's a great little bike rider, but she's little. And I got one of those flags to make her more visible to drivers. But I distinctly remember on a residential street at 8:30 in the morning, nothing really going on, a Prius driver started honking and coming really close to her, and it's just the mindset here that he literally said, "I'm going to call Child Protective Services because you're putting your child at risk." And I said, "You're the one honking at her. Who's more likely to cause her to crash?" But the mentality here is that it's for other people. It's only for fit, I don't know, 20 to 50-year-olds or whatever the stereotype is, and it's just wrong. So I think, Lorene, the more you can help us and everybody can help disprove that myth, the better. But I will say, in general, most of the people yelling and screaming about how a bike or bus lane is going to destroy their community is not the young people. It's mostly older people. And so we have to counteract that.
Thank you. We have Caro reminding us that there's a Streets for All meetup this Sunday at 5 p.m. at Brewworks in Santa Monica for all the 21 and over year olds here. And Hank, who says he's 69, he prefers to ride his bike to the doctor's office because he can park right in front. But then again, he's Dutch.
Hank, it's funny. I started what I think is LA's first bike bus, where I ride with my 7-year-old. That's a picture of our very first bike bus. And I pass out these flyers to parents at my kids' school. So the kids all ride to school together. And I noticed last week a father who I'd never seen with one kid on the back and one kid on the front on his bike, and he was kind of wearing their backpack. And he wound up joining our bike bus this week, and I heard an accent. I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Berlin." I'm like, man, maybe we just need to increase our quotas and our immigration to let these ideas permeate, because there's just a lot of ideas in the typical American psyche that aren't compatible with these types of changes. But for some reason, people that are from Germany or the Netherlands or countries in Europe, they want this stuff naturally.
Thank you. We have a specific question about a comment, Rockstar parking for bikes at St. John's. Thank you, Barbara. From Philip, you mentioned AB 645, and Philip's neighborhood council has wanted to do a CIS. Please define that, but when you answer, Michael. But we were waiting for another neighborhood council to provide some verbiage. Where can we find this kind of information?
So Philip, you don't need to do a CIS because AB 645 has already passed. So CIS is a community impact statement. It's the formal way that neighborhood councils can opine on things at the city council. But in this case, the answer is easy. It's passed the assembly, it's passed the Senate. Unless the governor vetoes it, it's going to become law. So thank you for your desire for advocacy, but actually in this case, it's not needed.
Michael, just a little bit more on the community impact statements. Do those have to come from the neighborhood council, or can a citizen submit one directly, or another group?
Any citizen or group can submit a public comment to a council file. Community impact statements are specific to neighborhood councils. You submit it through a separate system, and it gets flagged a little bit differently to council members on a specific council file.
Thanks.
Kent, that's all the questions in the chat. I'll leave it to you to move us to where we go next.
Okay.
Oh, wait, there's two more that popped up.
Ah.
Wow, a very long one from Jew. Talk about some of the contradictions in lobbying campaigns and how to navigate those. Speed cameras as an option for trying to improve safety, especially for pedestrians, but they're an extremely regressive tax. $500 fines, etc. So that's a contradiction. And the government is very likely to disproportionately enforce these in poor neighborhoods, i.e. against poor drivers. Organizations like ACLU oppose speed cameras. Are there considerations for expressly limiting the proposal to prevent this sort of weaponization against Black and indigenous communities? What strategies are available? He has another contradiction here with campaigns for bike lanes, for bus lanes rather. And
Lorene, if you want, I can answer it. I did read
all, so maybe you can just dive in here.
Yeah. So a couple of things. The ACLU did oppose speed cameras. They also opposed our bill last year for noise camera legalization. That turned into a study that the CHP is doing. But the ACLU opposes all automated enforcement. However, as everyone knows, there's also a desire to get armed police officers out of traffic stops. So we kind of have to pick and choose. What is better? Is an armed police officer pulling someone over for speeding better or worse than a camera that would take a picture of a license plate and mail a ticket? Or do we not enforce the law? Those are kind of the three buckets of options. I've heard it argued that none of the above. We should just redesign our streets to make speeding physically impossible. I agree with that. But to redesign 7,000 miles of streets is certainly not going to happen overnight. And we need relief now. We just had a 2-decade high of pedestrian deaths last year, and a pedestrian is killed once every 3 days in the city of Los Angeles. So having said all that, Laura Friedman, who's the author of AB 645, it failed last year, it failed the year before. She learned from those experiences. The first one is a warning, no fine at all. The second one, I think, is $30. It's not a $500 fine. And then it escalates. If you keep violating the law, it does get expensive, as I think it probably should. But the first one's a warning. The second one is a very reasonably priced ticket. It also does not take a picture of the driver. It only takes a picture of the license plate, which is a really important privacy consideration that was made. Also, cities are required to post signage before you get into the zone, letting drivers know that there will be automated speed enforcement. So in my opinion, the speed is the single biggest factor if someone lives or dies if they're hit by a car. And everybody in Los Angeles does not drive the speed limit, like almost without exception. I'm sure I don't drive the speed limit to the T every time I get in a car on those kind of rare occasions. So I'll just say that in my opinion, and in Streets for All's view, the trade-offs of automated speed enforcement are well worth the safety benefits. And we really appreciate how the author did all of this really considerate work to try to mitigate those factors. And this, in terms of placements of it, it was really important to us as well that they were not just placed in brown and Black communities or in certain neighborhoods. And the bill does have language to make sure that these are equally distributed and not concentrated in any one neighborhood. I'm not sure I fully understood. I know that Metro eliminated the 733, but I'm not entirely sure. So we don't see it as a contradiction. Obviously, we don't control whether Metro has rapid lines or not, but that's part of their next gen study. But we think we need bus lanes everywhere. They're the single biggest way. Speed of buses on Venice are up 130% since that bus lane was implemented. So whether it's a rapid bus or not, you're going to get there a lot faster. And if they choose to bring a rapid bus back, you're going to get there even faster. So we don't, I guess it was presented as a contradiction. We don't really see the contradiction.
Okay, that's great, Michael. I just wanted to observe that we've reached the 1 hour point. Do you have a little more time to consider a few more
I have
questions?
a few more minutes, sure. I see David Wolfberg's question. I don't know if you want me to. Oh, I don't think there's a question there. Maybe it's just a comment.
Okay.
I can just clarify about the last thing if you want. I was just saying that because Metro, I mean, the Rapid is just an example that the bus service have basically been cut continuously for the last 15 to 20 years. Whenever the consent decree ended, that prevented them from doing that. So, a bus lane is great, obviously, and it's certainly better than not having a bus lane. But there is if the bus service is cut even more, then it's not very helpful. So yeah, I didn't mean that there was a contradiction in advocating for the bus lane, but just
Okay, well, Ju, I think Michael spent quite a bit of time responding to you there.
yeah, it's okay. I just wanted to clarify that last thing. That's all.
Okay,
It
good.
doesn't. Yeah, I mean, he can go further if he wants to, but
Okay, Laureen, do we see another question there?
Yes, there's one more here from Jennifer, questioning the committee members being considered for Zoom participation in the bill for Zoom participation that's on the governor's desk. Do you have any intel on this?
I think what Jennifer is referring to is if the Bicycle Advisory Committee is going to be able to meet via Zoom if the governor signs this bill. The answer is no. The bill, unfortunately, was limited to only neighborhood councils. And if we had not accepted that concession, it would not have moved forward.
Okay, thank you. Catherine has a question about your organization's annual budget and how you're primarily funded.
Sure.
If you can disclose these things.
Our budget last year was about $400,000. The primary source of funding was 3 wealthy individuals that live in Los Angeles and want to see it be more bikeable, walkable, and transit friendly. We also have many people that give $10 a month, $15 a month, $30 a month, which we're super grateful for. And we've been winning grant opportunities like this Ballona Creek feasibility study. We're farming it out to SWA and they're doing the lion's share of the work. We're overseeing it, but we get to keep some of that money in exchange for our time. We just, actually, I don't think that's not public yet, but we just won a large grant opportunity that will also support the org. And we do fundraisers. In fact, we're having one tonight, if anyone's around the Arts District, and we're having another one on Saturday near Larchmont. And both of those are at streetsforall.org/events. And you can see those coming up. Those are the primary ways we raise money.
Thank you. Aaron has a question about working with people in the government bureaucracy who tend to wash their hands of projects and do minimal public input because they just want to get things done. How do we hold bureaucrats to account?
That is so important. A lot of the times politicians say really good things. I mean, if you go to Healthy Streets, actually it's not up there anymore. If you go to our YouTube channel and watch the video we did of council last August when they considered immediately adopting Healthy Streets LA or sending it to the ballot, 5 or 6 council members stood up decrying the city's moving too slow. People are dying in our streets. I'm embarrassed by the lack of progress in the mobility plan. But then that was it. And they moved on. And the city since then has ignored about a dozen opportunities to implement bike lanes during repaving. So it's so important to see the actions of politicians and not just what they say. And the other thing I will say is community input is really important, but it also needs to be, the greater region's needs need to be taken into account. And what I mean by that is at my neighborhood council last night, I chaired the transportation committee. We took up an issue of a bike lane on Fairfax between Wilshire and Colgate near LACMA. And This is on the city's mobility plan. There's a bike lane. And there was a lot of fear among a couple of public commenters about change, which I understand. But I also think it's equally important that as a city, if we don't build something every time a few people object to something, we're never going to be able to build a citywide bike network. We're never going to be able to build a citywide bus lane network. We're really going to have trouble getting things done. And so, again, I envy the speed at which China moves, building 20,000 miles of high-speed rail in 12 years. US could never do that. But I don't want to live in a dictatorship. I choose democracy, and I think community input's really important. At the same time, I think it needs to be balanced with the needs of the greater region, and to make sure that we continue to move everything forward.
Yeah, and just to extend that point a little bit, the cities that we look to as really model bicycle utopias, like in Europe, they often experience a lot of pushback too when they want to do something innovative or expand their network. So, it isn't as easy as if they have a slam dunk there and don't have to go through the same sort of thing. So
let me add one more thing, because I missed the second part of Aaron's question. What's going on in Culver City right now is really important. The city, essentially, a developer bought a city council seat, spent $500,000, and you do that in a city as small as Culver City, you're going to win. And that council seat that he bought became the swing vote, and the council voted 3-2 to rip out the protected bike lane or to restore a vehicle travel lane on the Move Culver City project. The fact that staff said that it's categorically exempt from CEQA and they don't need to do an environmental impact report is probably not consistent with the law, but it would also set a precedent for any city considering ripping out bike lanes to actually have to study what are the greenhouse gas emissions that are going to be emitted from restoring a travel lane? What are the vehicle miles traveled that are going to be increased from restoring a travel lane? So I think it's really important. This is not a Streets for All initiative. Other people are leading this, but the campaign just did finish raising $15,000. And it's very possible that a judge will issue a preliminary injunction to prevent the city from removing the protected bike lane while this is going through the courts. And that might happen, that might delay it through next election, which maybe there's an opportunity to change the council.
Thank you. If there is time for one more question, I had put in my question, your thoughts, seeking your thoughts on working with the tourism sector of our economy. And I believe that we could really market bike lanes as part of Santa Monica's stated tourism brand, which is a wellness experience. They are trying to promote Santa Monica as a destination for a health and wellness vacation. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on working with the tourism community.
I don't have any specific thoughts. I think that, so we look at certain things like Hollywood Boulevard, which is one of LA's most visited tourist destinations. And people, when they get there, are pretty disappointed. It's a highway. The sidewalks are narrow compared to the amount of pedestrians. And there's nothing that special about that street. Yeah, they have the stars on the street. That's cool. But like, it doesn't feel great. The Heart of Hollywood project that Mitch O'Farrell started, so one thing he did that I actually liked, and Hugo Soto Martinez is now championing, is going to really change that street. And I don't know how much of this is public yet, but you're probably going to see protected bike lanes on Hollywood Boulevard as well. So I think that as far as tourism, there's one thing that's clear. People rather go shop or have a bite to eat or have a coffee in a place that doesn't feel like a highway. It's incredible that 3rd Street Promenade in Santa Monica generates close to a fifth of the city's sales tax revenue. That's just what, 4 blocks, 5 blocks maybe? So these things are really popular. It hurts me that we don't have a single pedestrianized plaza in the city of Los Angeles akin to 3rd Street Promenade. That's just crazy. Maybe Broadway in downtown LA is going to be the first one. But I think that there's a great relationship. And And the last thing I'll say about tourism is it was always amazing to me that Americans would fly off to Europe and sit in a car-free square in Paris and sip an espresso or whatever. And then say, wow, this is so great. This feels so great. And then come back and get in their SUV and drive home. And never realizing like we can actually have those good things here too. It's really simple, actually. We just need to create spaces that people want to be in. And usually those spaces aren't freeways or by busy streets.
Thank you so much for that. I personally need to go. I'll leave this to Kent and Nancy to finish, but thank you.
Thank you. I also probably need to run, but it was really great talking to everybody. Thank you for your questions and for giving me the time and space.
This is wonderful, Michael. Thank you for sharing all your insights from your organization and your life with us. I think we've all learned a lot of very useful information. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We got a great turnout, I think. Got some good questions. And we did record this, so we'll make that link available if you want to share it, or if anybody had to leave early, you'll be able to watch the recording. Thank you again, Michael.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.